All right, we're live. So today on the Liquid Swan channel, I'm here to interview Matt. How you doing, Matt?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you, Mr. Swan?
Not bad. It's
Or
bright and
your
early.
lordship?
It's bright and early here. It's
Well, it's
so bright. There's no sun.
it's blowing an absolute hoolie, as we say in the UK over here,
Nice. Well, let's get into the
which is
questions,
yeah,
and we'll
good,
see where things go. So, who are you?
good.
What are your origins, and what brought you into the Sensible Center?
Well, um, we'll go from the last one and then go back, I think, because I'm fairly new to like being on this side of the fence rather than being a consumer. Although I've been around these spheres in terms of listening to things for an awfully long time.
Mm,
But I haven't really had the chance to create anything or write anything until quite recently. So I started up writing some stuff really seriously last year and trying to sort of get a bit more of my thoughts out there, and that's going good.
mm,
Um, in terms of who I am more widely, I'm, I guess, one of the more sort of Gen X members of the sphere, fairly central Gen Xer. So if you think about people like Semyo Gogol Radley, I'm in sort of that sort of era of person.
mm.
Um, so yeah, I grew up not only without the internet, but really in the very early days of anyone having even a simple little computer at home. So it's changed quite a lot since then.
Yeah, I guess you've been through quite a few changes over time, from the green screens to well, what we have now, a computer in your pocket.
Yeah, I mean it's a very different world, and in terms of the online world and how we manage that is, I think, quite interesting conversation to be had at some point.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you grew up in England.
yes, I've lived in England all my life. I now live sort of in the middle of England in Derbyshire, although I spent a long time in London working in finance in the city
Oh, okay.
before escaping to the country. Yeah, so I did that from university onwards, really.
I've been
Um,
to
so yeah,
I've been to Derbyshire. A friend of mine lives in the Peak District.
yeah, so I'm sort of at the edge of the Peak District National Park, and it's a nice area to live in. It really is. It's a sort of place that people come to on holiday, so it's a privilege to live here in a certain sense.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's almost like like a it's some areas kind of remind me of like pictures of Scotland. Though I didn't go to Scotland when I was there, but
Well, one of the interesting things about the Peak District is that if people haven't been to it or haven't don't know it because it's in England, and I presume lots of your listeners are in America. It's actually the name of the Peak District doesn't come because it's full of mountainous peaks.
hmm,
It's actually not like that at all. It's more sort of rolling countryside. Um, it's its name actually no one quite knows where it comes from. It sort of broadly comes from the pre-Roman tribe who just called
hmm.
themselves the Pixotan, and nobody entirely knows what that means. It just means like the people of the peak, but it's not related to mountains in that way. Although it's an upland area.
That's
But yeah,
interesting.
it's a nice area.
I almost wonder if Peak, didn't had a different origin altogether. Like maybe it wasn't even to do with mountains or tops of
Well,
mountains.
it in terms of the Peak District, as in the Peak, I think I've looked into it, and nobody really has a good solution about where it comes from, or I haven't found one. It's just a name of a tribe, and no one quite knows what that signifies.
Yeah,
Which is
that's.
nice in a way. It's nice not to reduce everything to a meaning.
Have you been to Buxton?
I know Buxton, yeah, quite well. It's about half an hour away from where I live, so it's a regular little trip to go to a nice town.
Yeah,
Beautiful place.
I've been to the theater there. I saw some what do you call it, prog rock band there. I'm with my buddy that lives there is
Right.
into prog rock, so we went to it with me and him were the youngest people in the entire crowd. The rest of them were all gray haired, balding, wearing their leather jackets. It was fun though. It was I'd never been to a prog rock concert. Had some guy from one of the guitarists from, I think, Peter Gabriel's band, and
All right.
it was pretty interesting. The water was good too. Reminded me of home.
But the water is good. Yeah, people often like take bottles and fill them up there at the spring.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I can't quite match a prog rock concert in Buxton, but there is a cavern not far away.
Oh, Pools
It's
Cavern.
literally this huge cavern.
Yeah, Pool.
Yeah, it also goes by the name of the Devil's Arse,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did actually go to a concert there 2 or 3 years ago, which was just quite a strange venue in this like huge great cavern to watch a band there. So that was
That,
interesting too.
that place is literally like down the hill from where my buddy lives. He like
Yeah,
lives like right beside it. Um, yeah,
nice.
it's pretty cool. If I wouldn't have thought to visit a place like that, but he ended up settling there, yeah, after living in and with me for many years. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, he went there, got married, and had a kid, so he's doing good. Um,
Good.
but back to you. What are your strengths, and what do you bring to the sphere?
Well, I mainly write about probably a mixture of standard politics. I guess we all look at a bit of that, geopolitics, and a sort of bit more to the cultural side. Um, I really what's going on in the world at the moment. In terms of what I wouldn't say what I bring, but I have been looking at the sort of geopolitical situation around you might call the former Soviet Union quite a lot.
Mm,
One of my major areas of interest is actually the Caucasus,
mm,
and that's should we say, it's a lively area at the moment and has been for the last few years. Big geopolitical changes happening there, and indeed, I'm hopefully all being well. I'll be going out to Armenia next month to
oh, oh,
catch
cool.
up with what's going on there on the ground.
I know a guy
Sorry.
who's an independent journalist. He's been to that area. He talks about it quite a bit. But if you want, maybe I could hook you up with him, or get you in contact after the show.
Yeah,
But
I'd love to.
that's definitely within your wheelhouse. Um, yeah, so you're still working on like you're sort of like working on like your contribution, I guess, in some sense, right?
Well, I've
Working
yeah, I mean,
towards it.
so I've got a Substack. Uh, yeah, I mean, I've written a good few number of articles over the last sort of 2 or 3 months, some of which have got some quite good coverage and some quite big follows. Um, I hopefully will be going on Academic Agents show in a couple of weeks to discuss some of the things I've been writing about on there. So that'll be
Oh,
good.
awesome. Yeah, that's great. Um, are you
Um,
working on any I guess you're working on that uh Armenia sort of project right now? Is that
um,
what
well,
is that what you're
that's
working on
more.
currently?
I I won't probably be putting anything out about that unless anything really changes, and if it does change, it probably won't be for the better for Armenia
Yeah.
before I go out. But when I come back, hopefully I'll be writing a few bits about that. I've been looking more on the sort of UK and US politics side recently,
Hmm.
and doing some work looking at this idea of the new elites and what that means for politics. In terms of what I'm going to be looking at immediately, I'm actually going to be looking a bit more into um, this interesting character, Dominic Cummings, who I
Hmm.
don't know if you're aware of.
Is
Um,
he the guy that had
he
that
was
scandal in COVID?
he did have a scandal in COVID, but yeah, I think there's probably more to that than meets the eye as well. It's one of the things I want to be looking at. But yeah, he was like the right hand man, almost like the chief of staff in a US sense to Boris Johnson um,
Hmm.
in 2019 when the sort of farce that was Brexit was sort of brought to a head with rousing 80 seat Tory majority that they've then done nothing with. And then in the early days of COVID, he was sort of forced out after a year or two in that position due to
Hmm.
breaking COVID regulations, as it were. He was
Yeah.
alleged to have gone for a drive to test his eyesight because he couldn't quite see properly. But
So he's just
and since then, he's he's been putting out some interesting statements, and that's the sort of thing I want to be looking at probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Do you got any got any previews for us on that? Or are you keeping it close to your chest for later?
Um, well, he was. For example, we've had this, and we will be having for the next several years a fairly major COVID inquiry, and it will last years because these things just. I think they're bad everywhere, but they seem to be particularly bad in the UK.
Hmm.
And he's been giving some quite interesting evidence to that. And basically, he's been coming out and just saying, what we all know. The interesting thing is that he's saying it, not that these things are there, but basically that politicians are a sham. Nobody runs anything. The cabinet of the UK is a Potemkin cabinet, and really all the powers in the civil service, and particularly in the head of the civil service, who's called the head of the cabinet office over here.
I'm
Um,
surprised. I guess I'm not surprised with the managerial bureaucracy that they put all the power in ultimately in the civil service, but it definitely doesn't
no, as I
show
say,
well as a democracy.
it's that's exactly right. I mean, it won't come as any surprise to anyone in our spheres that this is the case. The interesting thing is that a prominent political figure, not a politician himself, but very much a political figure, is coming out and saying it.
Yeah.
He's been quite vocal as well about sort of the only way through politics will be to get an Elon Musk type figure to come in and run something more directly. So this is where it sort of fits into this idea of are there the new elites out there who the likes of Musk and Thiel, who either personally or through someone they back may um, may try to shake up politics in some
Yeah.
way in the coming years.
Yeah, sort of taking a Caesarean role, clearing them out, and then trying to clean up the mess. But it's crazy because every time someone does that, like the mess is much bigger than they expect.
Yes, I mean, and it's another question entirely about whether that would or could be advantageous to us. I think that's very much an open question at this point.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
suffice suffice to say that I think all these characters are pretty well connected to government security spheres, and indeed have made a lot of money out of that. So
Hmm.
they're not necessarily our friends, although that doesn't mean we can't like ride on their coattails if anything happens about it. I think.
Yeah, well, it seems like in politics, is there's only there are the friends are the ones and everyone else is just sort of like a tertiary friends in the moment or enemy of my enemy. There's not much.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I don't think we can expect anyone in probably anyway in our lifetimes to come in and save the day for us. But as I say, it may be better for some time, or it may not.
Yeah, we're gonna have to save ourselves. Um, what are your predictions for the future in terms of politics and like what you're working on?
Well, in terms of politics, I think it's probably quite clear on both sides of the Atlantic. I think in my book, I am predicting a Trump victory.
Hmm.
I do think the regime in the wider sense needs a Trump victory to control the belief that is perhaps not unexpectedly rampant in the US that 2020 election may not have been the freest and fairest in history, shall we say? Um, I do think Trump has been tried and he has been contained, and I don't really expect anything to happen from that. I just expect that to happen as the result of the election. And let's face it, all that it needs is for something approaching democracy to show itself this time, and there will be, I think, a fairly comfortable Trump victory.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Well, if you could
we've
dream of
also in
a,
that got
oh, go ahead.
sorry.
I'll let you go ahead. You finish. You finish.
I was just going to say that the other side of that is that there's an increasing narrative that the black vote is splitting, particularly the male black vote is splitting, not evenly for Trump, but a substantial minority are now seem to be backing Trump in the polls,
Yeah,
which creates. I'm sure that's true, but the important thing for what's being managed in the political scene is that I think it does create a narrative that it was the blacks what won it for Trump, which is a regime narrative that I think they would quite like.
that would be a regime a regime win in their view, I guess.
Yes, it would. And in the
um,
UK, in
yeah,
the UK, it's looking bleak. We are going to see an absolute landslide Labour victory. I don't really see anywhere around that. Um,
zero seats, you know.
yeah, it won't quite go down to zero,
Yeah,
but the
ideally,
Tories are
it'd
killing
be great.
themselves.
It'd be
And
great just to wipe them out, like wipe them out, start again, like hold Labor to the fire because there's gonna be no one to hold them to the fire. Um,
oh, well, in one sense, yes, they do, and they do need to die. But the other problem we've got is that the Reform Party, who are the sort of leading contender to try and replace them, are really just as bad. They are, you know, they are straight out of regime containment books.
yeah.
So they're not an alternative, and any political alternative that's coming up
Why
will
did
be squashed immediately.
why do I'm guessing like they contain themselves because they don't want to get squashed like the other parties of the past, but I'm always so like surprised how like much they cuck like these parties, these third British parties. You know, like they don't have any balls at all. They just kind of do whatever H or whatever wants them to do. It's it's too bad. And then the guy came out the other day saying like H and H doesn't control us. We have to control H and H. It's like you're the dog wearing the leash,
It's
bro.
it's really they are really weak as an organisation, and I think the honest answer is that they wouldn't get the large amount of support in terms of coverage from the media uh, that that they do get in terms of write-ups in the newspapers, the ability to actually go on the television. Not that anyone watches that these days and put their case. They'd just be shut out if they didn't. So they are very much in the mainstream conversation, shall we say?
Yeah, weak,
And
weak, weak.
they, they are terrible. They are terrible.
Yeah. Okay, so for the U.S., what would be your worst case scenario prediction? Because you
The
kind of
worst
gave
case
what
for
I
the US.
assumed would be the best. Yeah.
Um, well, what would be my worst case scenario for the US? I think, in a sense, the worst case scenario is just business as normal. Is that what happens? Is that there's a second term of Trump. He again achieves nothing and does nothing, and you know, basically the regime has contains that energy. I think Trumpism itself is very personal to Trump. I don't really, I maybe don't follow US politics as much as some others in this sphere, but I don't get a sense that there's anyone really who behind him who could challenge afterwards. I think
Hmm.
one of the interesting features of the primary campaign is that one thing that happened is that um, one of the leading politicians who had actually achieved some level of conservative wins, if you like, DeSantis, was absolutely destroyed in it. And I think destroyed to the extent to which I don't really see him ever coming back at a national level again. I don't think he was great. He wasn't a wonderful performer, but he did actually achieve something. Not many people do that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Um,
I could see him kind of like in a couple of years doing it again, just because. I mean, I don't think it really matters, but come back in a couple of years doing it and
the,
hopefully learning from his experience. Uh, and he won't be running against Trump, which is good for him. Because that's a
Well,
rough go.
well, he won't. But it is rough. But the problem, as I say, was that in order to get anywhere, he basically had to annihilate his reputation with the Trump base, and I don't think they'll forget that, or at least not quickly.
Yeah,
So
maybe
I
maybe
sort of
not.
fear that
Yeah.
what one of the reasons of pushing him forward was to do that and actually destroy his reputation with the Trump base.
So it'll be the Indian guy then again. Indians just start taking over everything. It's crazy. So many of them,
uh,
right?
it it may well be. It may well be. I'm not. I certainly won't bet against it at this point. Should we say?
Yeah, yeah. All right. So here's a kind of a hypothetical question for you. If you could change one thing about our system, what would it be? But it can't be too huge. Like for example, or too broad. Like for example, you could restrict the franchise to only net contributors, for example, or what would be your thing that you think would cause like a cascade effect, maybe?
Well, certainly, the idea of restricting a franchise to net contributors would be huge. I think that's far too far too out. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe in the UK, the only thing that I think could um, uh, possibly alter the balance, or certainly the political conversation slightly, is if there was something that happened that flipped us from a first past the post system to a more of a proportional representation system.
Hmm.
All the energy on the European side, it comes from the fact that the parties of the centre do get challenged from parties from the outside. And the system works to contain them and does it very well, as we've seen with, for example, Meloni in Italy,
Hmm.
where the sort of promise that don't think was ever really there of a more right wing alternative. As soon as she came into office, nothing has changed, and she's just as much as a sort of NATO Euro-Atlanticist as anyone else.
Yeah.
And indeed, it's managed to contain Salvini of the other slightly more right-wing party, and has the effect of tarring his party with the association of being in government with Meloni. So it's not a solution, but in terms of allowing different debate, I certainly think that if there was something that would create that as an option, it would be interesting at least.
Yeah. 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 Well, when I looked at Europe a couple years ago, and I was like, wow, Europe's so good. Like they got everything you need. I was like, you know what they need? Millions of Africans. That's exactly what they needed. Um,
Yeah, and it's not stopping yet.
yeah.
Really, yeah. I mean, the big social economic thing would be is immigration. We've
Yeah.
we've got to just like stop immigration and indeed go a
I
little
think
bit
I
further
think
with
it's sort
that.
of like
And
it's. Do you ever play Pokemon when you were younger, or was that you were too old for that?
I'm certainly too old for that, mate.
Okay, well, I guess I'm a mid millennial if you're mid Gen Xer,
Yeah.
and so Pokemon was kind of just a thing when I was a kid, and you had to collect all like I think there was only 151 different kinds, and you'd have to like you play your Game Boy, you push your Game Boy buttons and move your guy around, collect these Pokemon, and I kind of feel like that sort of as millennials start taking power in Europe, they started like thinking of people like Pokemon. They're like, oh, I gotta collect them all. I gotta get the Ethiopians, the Somalians, the Saudi Arabians. They just collect all of them, and now they're like, oh shit, because like in Pokemon you can put them into Bill's PC, and you can store the Pokemon. They don't bother you. You don't have to deal with six of them. But I think they forgot that like these are human beings, and you have to let them out, and they start trying to sell like tourist stuff on the street and raping and stabbing people. It's crazy. I wonder if it's all
You
just
can't just keep them in as
just a Pokemon
you can't
conspiracy.
just. Yeah, I think that's a good point. You can't just keep them in a zoo. Your Pokemons are for life, not just for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Unless unless you can find a way of sending them back.
Well,
You know,
Cringewalker actually did the math on that, and he said it'll only take about 3 months, maybe even less, to get them all out. And that would be with luxury apartments built into a not a cruise ship, but like a container ship. But yeah.
um, it's not as if mass population movements don't happen.
Hmm.
Um, ask the Germans after the Second World War. If there's the will, it happens. But the question is getting there.
Yeah. And also, like, maybe you can keep a couple Pokemon just because, like, for the zoo. But anyways, I'm going too far into that. So my brain's all Pokemon brain because of the millennial stuff. But no, I'm just kidding. So anyways, we're getting near the
Yeah.
end. But are you looking forward to being on UO? Well, I guess it must be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's probably a cigar stream more than UO, but
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah, I am very much. I think it's good exposure,
It's a
and
pretty big boost.
nice that it's nice that some of my stuff's getting out there. I think so. Yeah, I'm very very pleased about that.
I can't remember if I can't remember like what the super chat is like on cigar stream, but UO it was freaking brutal. Like it's like doing a marathon. It's 4.5 hours. I
Yeah.
think for me it might have been more
Um,
than that, but it was fun.
uh, it's yeah, it is. It all can be quite long, and of course, it's in UK terms, it's quite sort of evening based. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's for the insomniacs amongst the amongst the crowd, not the bright and early risers
yeah.
as you are this morning.
Over here, I think cigar streams usually like mid after or early afternoon.
Yeah,
Like right now it's like almost 6 a.m. here, but yeah, no, it's weird. The whole time situation because there's so many of us spread all around the world.
yeah.
Makes it hard to coordinate
Um,
sometimes. But yeah. All right.
it
Well, hey.
does. It does.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, hey, I think this has been a great interview. Actually, like you've been quite tight, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Cigar Stream or wherever you're going to end up. And
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
I hope to hear back from you. About this, and I think everything went really. I'll put your Twitter and stuff in the comments if you prefer, or I can not. It's up to you.
Yeah. No. That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Um.
And
And
send me
yeah.
the.
And there's a link to the Substack on the Twitter bio, so
Okay. Yeah,
people can find me through that.
I'll put both on there. It's just so that it makes it easier. But yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, thanks for chatting with me, Matt, and you have a good rest
Yep.
of your day.